Hi, my name's Hannah Yore. I'm the Director of International Programs at SAGE, and I'm really thrilled to be in conversation today with Kasha Nabagesera, who is here to participate in our Global Storytelling Archive. Kasha is a Ugandan human rights activist and pioneering figure in the international LGBTIQ human rights movement. She's the founder of Freedom in Rome, Uganda, an LGBTIQ human rights organization. And among many other accomplishments, Kasha organized Uganda's first Pride Parade and created Uganda's first LGBTIQ magazine called Bombastic. Kasha is considered by many to be the founder of Uganda's LGBTIQ human rights movement. She was also the recipient of the Right Livelihood Award in 2015. So, Kasha, again, thrilled to be in conversation with you today. Thank you for your time. Let's start by hearing a little bit about your childhood, your family background, and the environment that you grew up
in. Thanks for having me. It's really a great honor and opportunity. Especially on a topic that is not really on top agenda of very many LGBT human rights organizations. So really, it's a privilege. Yeah, I was born in Kampala, Uganda. I'm the eldest of two. I have a young brother who has 5 children now. I'm yet to have one. Yes, but I grew up in a middle-class family. Both my parents were working at the Bank of Uganda. I went to the best schools, at least according to Uganda standard. They were referred to as one of the best schools, and also the schools known for their history for the kids of royalty. And since I come from that side, so really my childhood was a pain in the ass to my parents and also to my teachers, but to me it was wonderful. I didn't see anything wrong with me apart from always people pointing out to me that I was different. I got lots of punishments because I went to boarding school when I was 4 years. Imagine a 4-year-old. It was the first boarding nursery school in the country. And I think it's one of my best memories of school. And every time they came to take me home or to take all other pupils back home, we refused. We would make our parents run after us. Because at home, I had a baby crying all the time. All the attention was on the baby. Here, I had 49 other kids to play with. So school in nursery was more fun than the rest of my schooling times, I must say. Yeah, so really, I had a great childhood. I can't really complain.
When did you first, or I mean, when you think back, what was your understanding? I think this can be a difficult question, but to the best of your ability, I mean, thinking back, what was your understanding of gender and sexuality when you were young in these boarding school days? And when did you and how did you, I guess, realize that you had attraction to girls? When did you officially come out as a lesbian? What was this process like for you in your younger years?
For me, I remember being asked what I wanted to do when I grow up, and all I said is that I wanted to marry a very beautiful girl and have a beautiful family. And then they said girls cannot marry fellow girls, but I said, but me, I love girls. And by then, I didn't even know what that meant until my class teacher said that I'm a lesbian. I had lesbian tendencies. And she said that I would be sent out of the country, out of Uganda, if I did not stop my attraction towards girls. Here I am, 7 years old. I'd never heard of the word lesbian. It was so big for me. It's only when I was 13 years that everything started making sense. Why I was always the last in the bathroom, just admiring other girls. I saw was different. Girls would draw pictures of themselves with their future families, with men and all this. And for me, that was not something that I was really into. But when I was 14 at high school, in secondary school, and we had a dance and was supposed to be going to the boys' school for the social gathering. I said I was not interested because we used to have these socials in our own school, the girls' school, and they were more fun for me because I used to dance with the girls anyhow I wanted. And then here I was that we were supposed to all have a partner who was a boy in the different school. And I said to my class teachers that I wouldn't be going. And then they started saying, is that the reason why you keep writing love letters to fellow girls, sending them? Because I used to spend all my pocket money buying presents and, to different girls. And of course, that also caused many problems for me while growing up in school because I couldn't just stick to one girl. I just loved every beautiful girl in the school. So that made me get expelled from so many schools, just writing love letters, just being in love with other girls. Um, and it followed me throughout my education until even university. So my higher education wasn't really fun for me at school because I got into trouble for who I loved. So it's not really the best of my times when it came to my education. That's why I prefer my time during nursery to my education.
Right.
But I never came out as a lesbian. I've never, even up to today,
Mm. Mm.
because I just openly lived my authentic self because I didn't know it was a problem. And
Mhm.
when I found out that it was really a problem, a crime, an illegality, it was too late. There was nowhere to hide because I was already out there in the open. I
Mhm.
never sat down to tell anyone that, for example, my parents, that I'm gay and all this. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know that these words like closet existed. I
Mhm.
only learned these things when I became an activist when I was 19 years.
Mhm.
But I'd never heard of closets because this is something that was never talked about. These languages of coming out, that
Sure.
is not really something that I grew up hearing, that someone has to come out to tell whoever care to listen that they are gay and all this. So all that language was new to me. It made me more inquisitive.
Mm.
It made me more inquisitive. That's why I actually started uh, to read a lot, to research a lot about activism and my sexuality and gender and all that, because I wondered why it had become really a big problem for everyone. I was always in the tabloids, always in the newspapers. Then the school administration was expelling, same-sex loving students from different government schools. So it became really a big problem. So I invested a lot in really discovering what the issue was. And that was the beginning, really, of my interest and also learning these words
Sure. I
of
want to talk,
activism, yeah.
yeah, I want to talk more about your activism in a moment, but before we leave this topic about, your early years and your understanding of gender and sexuality, um, you say you never had a moment where you came out, and you also describe folks in school, teachers, people of authority being punitive or punishing your love letter writing to other girls. Even though you didn't come out to your parents, they became aware of your attraction to other girls and women at some point.
Yes.
What was their response to this? What were these conversations like with them? Were they supportive? Were they scared for you?
No, because the first time I was suspended. They told my mother about my involvement with girls, and
Mhm.
she said, "Well, she'll outgrow it. There's no big deal."
Yeah.
But I think my mom had already known because this was now secondary school, but already in primary, I'd already been punished at school assembly for my attraction to girls. My parents had already been called. So when she was told that it's still the same thing in secondary, she said she would outgrow it.
Yeah.
And so for them, it was really not a big deal until university when I almost got expelled. And that's when my mom said, okay, now this is something very serious. This is your last year. If you get expelled now, that means you'll have to redo the whole 3 years of your university education. And that's when
Yeah.
she told them that I was sick and my sickness has no cure.
Yeah.
Um, of course, then I was like, why would my mom say I'm sick? Maybe I'm really sick because this is becoming a big problem. But later on is when I realized that she was actually trying to save me because she realized that now this was the last straw. And since it was my final year in real education, she had to find a way of saving me. I remember when she came out and told me, I'm going to say something you're not going to like, but I just have to say it. Otherwise, you will have to go and pack your things, and that will be the end of your education.
Right.
And so for me, all that, because I had to report to the school administration to show that I'm not dressed like a boy according to the administration rules. I had to report every morning and every evening to show that I'm not wearing a tie, I'm not wearing baseball caps and all that. So that was really things that kept compiling and compiling. And like, started making all these flashes when I was growing up in school. And I'm like, why is this really becoming a problem everywhere I go? It has even become now news in the newspapers and all this. So when when my parents were told, um, when I was young, they just played it. Then secondary, they said she'll outgrow it. Then here I am, university, and they're like, okay, now this is a serious issue. But it's something that we've never really sat down to talk about because they've known me since childhood that this is who I've been or who I am. And really, we never had a moment to sit down. It was always about saving me in education. Because I went to so many schools. I'm only telling you about a few of them. I went to so many different schools because of being expelled for same thing, always punished. I remember in one of the schools, my headmaster was a British. He passed on last year. Was a British. He actually protected me from the students, and this was a mixed school. He protected me from the students and teachers, and he told them to stop harassing me and all this because people used to make fun of me. I tried even to get a boyfriend, and everyone used to tease us that we are homosexuals because they said he was dating a fellow man and all these kind of things. And so that drove him away. And I was happy because I was actually giving it a try to see if it would really work. And it just didn't. It was never meant to be. So it didn't last, but we are still good friends up to now.
You and this man.
Huh?
You and your boyfriend. Oh my goodness.
Yes, we are still friends because he said that I saved him from a bullet. That's what he calls it. Because it's like all the teasing I was growing up, because he was also always teased by people because he was very, very tall, very tall. He was not normal tall, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, why don't I befriend this guy? And then people started saying we are boyfriends and all this. I remember one time we kissed and we laughed at each other because there was no chemistry at all. There was nothing.
Trying to force something that wasn't there. I see. That's really how wonderful that you're still friends. Is he he's in Uganda, living in Uganda?
No, he lives in Tanzania with his family. His children and all this. He was already a friend even before I met him, before we went to the same school, because he was in the school with my brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kasha, let's pivot a little bit to your activism. You founded Freedom in Rome, Uganda 20 years ago, around 2003. Can you take us back to that time and talk about what inspired you to found this organization and what the political and social climate was for LGBTIQ people in Uganda at this time?
Well, as I've told you, in 1999, when I was about to lose my education, when my mom went and told them the administration meeting, I decided to do research about this whole homosexuality and everything. And so it was a few years before Freedom in Rome was formed that I joined activism. And this was social activism because I didn't know that you could even have organizations to advocate for this. And internet was really something new in Uganda. So accessing that kind of information was very expensive. I remember I used to save a lot of my pocket money just to sit in an internet cafe. And so that's when I found out that this is not just about me. I'm not just being singled out. It's actually illegal, not only in Uganda, but in so many other African countries, so many other countries in the world. And for me, that was an intrigue and also something that attracted my attention so much to really dig deep. And so all those years, because I was already in the newspapers, so many LGBT people had already identified me. So people would come, because I remember even at university, I used to be on the agenda of the orientation week, and they would warn freshmen to stay away from me or else they would be expelled. So many people really knew who I was and my story. So I had already built social networks. And because I used to party a lot, and even the media used to say social party, lesbian social animal, lesbian party animal, all those kinds of things. So it was easy for me actually for people to find me, to connect with me who were like me. And so we began social activism. But then that also caused a lot of anxiety in many people, because now being with me was like outing there. And also because at university, when everyone they suspected to be LGBT, they would say that is a Kasha. Um, so I lost friends, but I also made friends. And then for me, I was like, well, there's nothing for me to lose anymore. Why don't I really now concentrate on really finding out what the problem is? Why is this really something that is not just about Uganda, but Africa, around the world? And so that's when I was introduced to Behind the Mask. I didn't search very far, because I didn't even really know exactly what to search. I remember telling the internet cafe operator that put homosexuality, and everyone in the cafe stopped whatever they were doing and looked at me. And this was a university cafe. But no one was surprised that it was me, because everyone at the university knew. Because there's a time when the university was looking for me, and I ran away from the university to hide at home. And they pinned my photograph on walls, on trees, everywhere, wanted, as if I was a thief. Uh, so everyone knew why I was wanted and all this. So it wasn't really a surprise to see that I would go into a cafe and openly tell someone to help me search homosexuality. I didn't even know how to search such things. But when I put homosexuality in Africa, everything was about South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was about South Africa. So that caught my attention. And that's when I came across Behind the Mask. That's when I came across a lot of stories about activists like Bev, did see. I came across Simon Foley. I was like, oh my God, this is serious. I actually became a little bit antisocial. I reduced on my socializing, because I was always now in the internet cafe. I was intrigued, I was curious, and all that. And that's when my brain started now operating in a different way. I'm like, okay, I can now only party over the weekend. That's fine. During the week, let me read the Constitution of Uganda. Let me read the Penal Code of Uganda. So I began educating myself, because here I was, 18 years, a university student, and I had no idea that I was being singled out because it was illegal in Uganda. So I imagined the younger ones, the ones I used to read about in the newspapers who are being expelled from their schools. I'm like, do they even know why they're being expelled? Because no one told me why I was being expelled apart from when I was 7 years.
Right.
So it began making sense. I'm like, okay, there's actually a movement out there. People are actually, so I can do that here. I have the support of my family, I have friends. I didn't know really the impacts, the effects of what I was getting myself into.
Yeah.
I really had no idea. I was just like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And so when I went to meet some of my friends, they were shocked that I didn't know. Most of my friends actually knew that it was illegal, but no one talked about it because they thought I was just being stubborn. But it was actually ignorance that I openly lived my life like that, which right now I see as a good thing, because a lot of good things have come out of it. Many people are now free to live their authentic selves and all this. So those years I finished university, then I continued doing my research, meeting my friends, and just talking about LGBT movement. And people were scared. Many people were in the closets. Now here I'm learning these words coming out, closets. And I'm learning the jargon, the LGBT jargon. transgender. I'd never heard of things like transgender. And then I said to myself, I said, no, I may express myself like a boy, but I don't feel like a boy. So I'm not transgender. I had also to self-aware myself to exactly define who I was. Because I'm like, well, I like boys things, but I don't feel like a boy. I just like expressing like it. So it was a lot of self-awareness I did. Uh, I started writing emails to different organizations, introducing myself. Some responded, I think others were like, oh, is this, where is even Uganda, maybe? Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
But then for me, the starting point was behind the mask when they responded. And if you look now, 23 years later, and if you look at my organization that produces the magazine, you'll see that it's actually almost a replica of Behind the Mask. Because when they closed Behind the Mask, I said, I learned a lot from this organization. Let me do something almost like where I really, really learned my activism from. So I approached some friends and I told them that we could start our own movement and all this. While in the process, also some elder people came to approach us because now for us, we're always in the media. Every Monday, the newspapers would come out about where I was, who I was with, where I partied. And so people began waiting for us in these places to see how we looked like. Maybe some people thought we are green, others maybe thought we are, I don't know. But people were really inquisitive. And then others came to attack us in different forms, sexual, physical, verbally, and everything. So when these men approached us, they said they were heading a lesbian organization. And we are like, but you're men. How can you head a lesbian organization? Where are the women? At least you would have come with women and then we'll know. And they didn't have any women. And so when we did research, we found out that they were actually telling the global or the international community that they are heading a lesbian organization, but there were no lesbians at all. They didn't even know any until they came to look for us. And that's when I told my friends, instead of just doing research and socializing, because we really had a very strong social movement. We were so many. People left when they heard that we were going to start the political part of our activism because they were afraid. But then we gave them assurance and told them, since some of us already have nothing to lose, we shall be the face and the voice. We just need you to give us the support that we need. And so that's, if I may say, that was like the beginning of Freedom and Rome. Because I grew up in a feminist setting all my life. My family is very matriarchal throughout generations and generations. So for me, I feel that since this was a very contagious topic, we needed a space for us as women, but we still needed to be with our brothers and bisexuals and now the transgenders, because now I've learned the jargon and a little bit of activism. I was still very raw, but at least I'd improved. Yeah. So that's when we approached these other friends of ours and told them, why don't you also start the gay organization? So that there's a lesbian organization. And so really, in a nutshell, that's how Freedom and Rome started. Some left the organization because they were scared we were going to expose them. Right. Others said we shall stay there in the background. And us who were willing to really, speak out. Then we started using my mother's office to access free internet and to print out everything. So we had to learn to teach ourselves how organizations are formed. Then we couldn't, of course, register the organization. We didn't want an organization with a name that would easily identify us. So we talked to friends and colleagues who were good in literature and all those things. So we said, what do we want to do exactly with these organizations? Who do we want to represent? We simply said, we just want to be safe, be able to walk freely without people pointing at us, without people verbally abusing us. And that's where the Rome came from, Freedom and Rome.
It's really such I love that because I wasn't aware of that. This why like where the Rome came from. So it makes
Yeah,
complete
we
sense.
just wanted to be able to move freely
Really.
in Uganda because people would wait for us every night when we're coming from the
Right,
bar and they would attack us and they would do
right.
this. So it was about us being free to move anywhere without
Right,
any
the freedom.
problems. So
Yeah.
that's where freedom and Rome came from.
I want to ask about the backlash and even the threats of and experience of physical violence in response to your activism. One thing that really stands out is in 2010, you know, the Ugandan newspaper Rolling Stone published the names and photos of individuals that were suspected, in their words, to be LGBTIQ with the title "Hang Them," and this list included you and fellow Ugandan activist David Kato, who you later collaborated with to sue the publication. I know you've spoken about this a lot in other interviews and other media you've done, but just for those listening here today who may not be familiar, could you just share a little bit about what led you and David to take legal action against the Rolling Stone? What was the goal of the lawsuit, and how did it shape your understanding of I guess the legal system in Uganda as you went about taking legal action?
Yeah, it was really, it's really still sad that even if we went to court and won the court case, we still lost David. But for us to go to court in the first place is because we had already tested the judicial system. We had taken two cases to the courts before. Um, and so it was part of our strategy as a movement that let's test the legal system and say, because at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is decriminalization. But we cannot wake up today and just say, let's go and start dismantling all this penal code and without having tested, you know, how the judicial system is, especially in a country that is dictatorial. There is no separation of the bodies, the executives. So we really wanted to test. But another thing was because we were fed up. This was not the first list. It was not the first time that we had been in the newspapers as outed, suspected, perceived homosexuals and all that. But this time was very different because they called for the hanging. They, they basically incited the public. And on top of that, this outing went further to, to tell people where we live, the type of cars we drive, where we go out to party. So this time it was not just the usual gossip where they say LGBT or homosexuals were partying here and there and there, or a man kissed a fellow man in this. But this time they were very specific, and these were the youth who were doing this. These were university students who were looking for quick money, but they were putting our lives in danger. And we said, if we do not take a step, this is going to continue. And we do not want this because something will happen to someone. And indeed, as we thought, it came to pass. So for us, we said we needed to take this for so many obvious or different reasons. And of course, I remember because when you read that article, the beginning of the article, the very beginning when they are starting the article, they are quoting me as saying that they interviewed me, and I told them they quote me as saying that we are interested in the young, in recruiting the young, because the old ones are about to die. So we want to recruit young ones so that the movement can grow. That is a quotation, and that is the beginning of that whole stupid article. And when you see what they were saying, where they said they interviewed me, I didn't even know the place. I didn't know these boys. These were, we all got to know Rolling Stone when it came out. I was not even in the country, because even when Rolling Stone came out, I was not even in the country. I remember I was on my way from Sweden to Geneva to address the UN during the CEDAW committee. And on my way to the airport, this is when the idea came that we need to sue these people. It was Josh Krohn, a journalist from the US, who actually called me to tell me about Rolling Stone and he wanted to confirm if the quotation was true. So everything did make sense. They were not online, I couldn't read. So I told people to scan the newspaper and send it to me. And I had a very, very bad flight. It was, of course, quick. But as soon as I reached my hotel room and accessed internet, I talked to my two colleagues who were online, especially David, because his photo was on front page. And I said, David, I think it's time we put a stop to these media outings. And he said, I was waiting for someone to tell me this because I'm tired myself. So I told him, since you're on the ground, talk to other activists. As soon as I'm done here, we come and, do something about this. And so that was the start of us putting a stop to these media outings. Of course, they did end. We saw what happened in 2014 and all this. They kept going. They're still ongoing. And now, because of the injection of print, with all this social media, it's even worse. Because there's really no much control over it. But at least people are aware that they can easily be sued.
Right.
So it's I can't say it's very escalated, but it's now in different forms. It's very difficult to control the media, but at least people know that they can be held accountable. Unfortunately, we lost David. There's nothing we can do about that to bring him back, but we can only continue his fight and just keep his spirit alive.
I want to just ask one more. So for those that are maybe listening to this interview, just to be a bit more explicit about, what you said, Kasha. So, and people who may not be familiar, David Kato was murdered following the trial. And obviously this was a devastating blow to the LGBTIQ human rights movement globally, and the movement in Uganda. But of course, I can't imagine how it may have impacted you personally. I want to ask you about how his passing shaped your activism and your mission, but I also want to, especially because, this archive is really about intergenerational storytelling. For a lot of young people, whether they're here in the United States, where I'm living, or in Uganda, they may look at these high profile murders in David's case and be really scared, frankly, to speak out and to be active. And I guess this question is twofold. How did his passing affect your activism and you personally, if I can ask? And what advice would you give to younger generations of LGBTIQ human rights defenders who are scared? And how do we remain emboldened and not terrified, frankly, if I can just put it plainly?
One thing, especially for the purpose of this episode, one thing you should know that me and my friend, another colleague whom we started this whole work together, a trans man, Victor, we discriminated against David when he approached us to join the movement because he was much older. He was 20 years older than me. And we are like, why is this old man following us everywhere? Why is he interested in joining us? Is he a spy for the government? And all these kind of things. First of all, he was shabby. Here we are the youth. We are used to looking good and all this. David was an older man, 20 years older than me, you can imagine. He didn't know how to dress, so we felt that he didn't fit the stereotyping of the cool kids. And so I remember I was organizing an East African LGBT New Year party, very huge, the biggest that East Africa has ever seen. And this old man again kept following us and asking for the party venue. I remember we gave him the wrong party venue. But David was very persistent, very, very persistent. He never gave up. Every time we pushed him away, he never gave up. That's how resilient he was. And there we were, and he was at the party venue. And we looked at each other and said, let him in. We just looked at each other like this and told them to let him in, because we are like, it's like we're saying the same thing, that there must be something special about this man. After how we've treated him, and he still insisted. And he was so friendly. He came straight from the entry to us to greet us, and even thanked us for inviting him after giving him the wrong address. So we told him to come and meet us on Monday. My God, David came like 3 hours before the meeting. Jesus Christ. So we sat him down, and this is when David told us his story. Imagine we were chasing away someone whose story I had not even heard, simply because we were cool kids. And he was much older than us. We didn't think he had anything to offer. We didn't, you know, and that is happening a lot these days, because simply people have AI, people have iPhones and all this. They abuse us. Just on Monday this week. No, today is Monday. Last week on Monday, a younger activist said I deserve to be in the museum of a museum of basically he said it in a derogatory way, that I'm very old, I'm 50 years plus, I deserve to be in a museum of homosexual, of lesbians who leak. Oh, it was very derogatory. And the post is still there on Facebook. I'm like, he doesn't know that actually he's living the life he's living because of the sacrifice I made. I didn't respond him, of course. But for me, after receiving that, reading that on social media, 24 hours later, you contact me. I'm like, what are the odds?
Oh, you mean eye contact? Oh,
Yes.
wow, that's poetic almost.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. I'm like, what are
Poetic.
the odds?
Yeah.
I'm being bashed on social media.
Right. And then
By
you have to be a younger lesbian, like, please talk to
and
me.
then here I am. Someone
Right.
wants to talk about me,
Aging. Yeah.
me
Yeah.
aging.
Yeah.
So when David, because I had to go to the mortuary to identify him
Sure.
myself, and the way he was murdered, half of his brain was down, and he had been put in the mortuary where bodies stay in the mortuary for months and months. So you can imagine I had to jump over bodies, blood, maggots, to go into the last corner because the room is full. Even when you're entering there, there's blood, maggots flowing. And then they told me I had to go and enter and look at all the bodies piled on the ground to identify my friend. So you can imagine how that, because the day before I was with him at Maipa, and we were supposed to meet the day he was killed to talk about our security after the Rolling Stone court case, because we had gotten lots of threats after we won the court case. And imagine we are planning to meet the day he was killed to talk about our security as the plaintiffs. So it reminded me so much of when David used to say that we are taking things for granted, but what we are doing is actually very dangerous, because David began his activism in South Africa, with Simon Colley, people like that. So he had a lot of experience. And that is one thing we learned from him, a lot of experience. He knew when to stop, when to pause, and all this. And this is what he was teaching us. So he left a very big gap, especially in young activists like us. But us who worked closely with him, we learned a lot. And that is what we've been trying to pass on to the younger generation. Some people, of course, take things serious, others don't. Like some of us took things lightly. I'm one of those people. Actually, he kept complaining about me all the time that I live freely, I live carelessly.
Mm.
It's like you really need to know when to, to pause, to stop, and all this. And that's when I started the security committee for the movement. I made him the chairperson of the security because he was really, really a very cautious person when it came to security. And so when recently the bill was passed, I was here in Massachusetts on medical leave because I just had I'd just come from a hip replacement surgery. But then my house was attacked, and one person in my house was raped. Another's hand was broken. A lot of documents were taken, and this is the time they are passing the law, and it's all over the media. And I said to myself, what would David do in this particular time? Should I really go back in this kind of situation? Because I was supposed to go back and then come back in 6 months for review. Then I said, no, maybe it's time for me now to work from somewhere else. Yeah. Maybe I can even be more productive than being on the ground, putting everyone around me in danger, because that is what I kept doing. Everyone around me was always in danger. My office was always in danger. Those who, I don't know how many times our property has been stolen from people waiting for people coming from our premises, people being beaten and all this. So I said to myself, I've mentored so many people over the years, and they're doing great, and I can still actually support, but maybe it's time for me to support from afar, where I don't have to always look on my back for, you know, I'm not saying that this place is the best, but at least it's much safer. I'm not known here, but you know, you're Black, you're a woman, you're lesbian, you're an immigrant. Right. So you can imagine all that. But I'm actually starting to like it a lot more than the past 2 years, because the past 2 years I've basically just been dealing with my health issues. Right. But now I feel that I'm actually emotionally and mentally much better than I was on the ground. I'm always talking to my colleagues, my community back home. Here I have a lot of people I can meet for resources, to mobilize resources and all that. And I think now I no longer have the regret or the guilt of thinking that I've abandoned the movement when it needs me the most. Right. No, right. I think I've really been, I've tried a lot of transformational leadership over the years. And many of them, even just starting next month, many, I'm going to meet them in New York. They're coming. The director of Freedom and Rome is also coming for the CSW. Yes. And yeah, and of course, they'll come and visit me here. And so I no longer feel the guilt that I've been feeling before. Yeah. But for me, it's mostly, before I left, coming to this topic we're talking about, before I left, this is something we're talking about, the elders in the community, because the young ones see me as an elder, but there are so many elders I look up to who were there for a lot of support for us when we were growing up. Right. Many who were already married, many who were in the closets, but they knew of us. They helped us in so many ways. But I've seen some of them breaking down. I've seen some of them without any network for support, without any resources and all this. And I wonder, I'm like, with the socio-economic and political environment, how are these people really going to handle? So I started a WhatsApp group where some of us can just talk, catch up with each other, reminisce on the old good days. And, yeah, so for me, I feel that we need this generational spaces where we can share. I remember when I met Levi, I've forgotten his second name, but I met him. He was one of the people who were on Stonewall on that fateful, or should I call it, beautiful day, the start of our rally uprising. And I gave him my passport and I told him to sign, to autograph my passport. He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yes." I remember I met him in Toronto in 2009. In Toronto in 2009. And he was 60 years. Mm. And I'm like, oh my God, how have you survived with over all these, right, issues that the movement has gone through, from the Stonewall to the HIV pandemic and all this? And I said, I hope one day I can make it that far, so that I can look back and just sit with the young ones and tell stories and all this. Because sometimes when I tell people stories, they think it's fiction movies. Right. They think it's fiction. If I tell them things we went through trying to access offices. I remember I went to the Uganda Human Rights Commission one day, and the commissioners that are supposed to be to protect, they're supposed to be the the bearers, the duty bearers, telling us that
Yeah.
maybe because we are so ugly, that's why we don't have boyfriends and have decided to turn to each other, offering their sons and all this. And when you tell people, some of them think it's actually fiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But these things
Yeah.
really happened. But we need to put network support systems in place
Yeah.
because people wear out. I know so many people who
Right.
have burnt out, and there's no really support systems for them. So
Yeah.
many people have sacrificed a lot. We lost an activist in Burundi simply because they volunteered all their lives to activism. They didn't have an income and all this. And they died of malaria simply because they just couldn't afford to pay the bills of malaria treatment in hospital. So there's a lot of sacrifice other activists have done that have made it possible for us to be here today.
Yeah.
But now that we are here today, what are we doing to actually say thank you to them? Have we put systems in place for them? Have
Right.
we put, even loneliness can kill. It's not just about, people think that only if you're on the front line is you're an activist. My dear, so many people have played huge, huge parts in this movement that whose names will never be known.
Yes.
Whose names will never be known. So many of the things that some of us are seen doing, these things come from the people in the background
Right.
who are advising us, who are, supporting us and all this. And people don't actually even ever sit down to think of this.
Yes.
We are here today. Um, we are here today because of the sacrifices so many elder people have done. And for me, I just want to tell all our viewers and listeners that anyone who has any program that I can volunteer for that can really help support the older activists of our movement, just contact me, just contact Sage. They'll give you my contacts. I'm willing to give my spare time, my free time to do something for the people who have made it possible for some of us even to receive the awards we are receiving today. It's because of them that we got inspired. It's because of them that actually I have hope that one day even my country will be a better place than it is today. It's because of them that some of us can even stand up and say, I am who I am, because we've seen others did it and it changed, the course of the movement and the environment. So for me, I just want to say thank you. You're not alone. And I'm ready to say thank you in person, online, through my time as volunteer. Really.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Kasha. I want to ask, I know we're wrapping up here. We had a lot of questions about your activism and your work, although I think what we'll do just to make the most use of our time together, because I know you have to leave us shortly, is I'll link out to some other interviews that you've done talking about the Ugandan movement. And I know we had some questions about particularly the draconian laws and the 2023 anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda that you've spoken about quite a bit. And I'll link out to those in your interview rather than
Yes,
asking you to repeat yourself today because there's a lot.
there is a recent one I did with the CAR Center.
Yes. And I can
Yes.
link out to that, to the interview, so that folks who are interested in hearing more about that part of your journey and perspective and expertise can view it. But before we leave, and just thank you so much again for your time, I want to ask you a little bit about legacy. You're in your 40s and you're one of the younger elders that's part of this storytelling archive. We talked about this before we started, that so many folks in your community consider you and call you an elder, but you're on the younger end of this archive. But just looking forward as you age and as you anticipate your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, what do you hope are there things that excite you about aging? Of course, we talk so much about the challenges, but anything that brings you joy in your older age, whether it's community or just kind of reflecting on your life, and what, I suppose, do you want your legacy to be as you think about your later years?
It's not something I really sit down and really think of,
Yeah.
because every day is a learning lesson for me. I like working with communities to bring an impact to someone's life. So for me, I just want people to to appreciate these spaces that they find and not take advantage or take them for granted, because so many people sacrificed a lot to put these safe spaces there. So let them continue to embrace them, but also make sure that they're even more safer for those who will come after them. But mostly, I just want people to know that they can never be free when others are not free, because we have so many people who have left the movement or the country. They've gone in the diaspora, and that is the end of the activism, because now they feel safe, now they can make their own money. So, and they give up on the struggle and the movement. I just want people to know that actually, more than ever, that is when many people who have since left their countries should be able to do a lot for their movements back home, because they're in better positions than they were when they were on ground. And for me, that is a legacy I want to continue to, to live and to advocate for. Uh, to advocate for, so that people know that when you get a chance to go to safety, more than ever is when you should give back to your communities. So many people have given up, have
Okay.
given up on the movement ever since they left. And another thing is just that people should have hope. People should have hope. Things are not going to be smooth. It's called a struggle for a reason. Things are not going to be easy, but people should just not give up. But they should also learn when to pause, because we are better activists alive than dead. So people should learn when to pause and refill. But also, um, instead of abusing people they think are old, they do not fit. they should actually be they should actually be looking out for those people, to hear their stories, to hear their wisdom, and to learn a lot from the elders of this movement, because what worked in the 70s may not work in 2025, or it actually may work better in 2025 than it worked in 1970. So exchange of knowledge is very important, intergenerational exchanges. Yes, and also just remind people that we are not a pariah movement. Simply because you're LGBT or LGBT activist, you should only concern yourself on matters of LGBT. No. Also, show injustices should really matter to you. Don't only speak out when issues are happening to LGBT persons. Speak out on any injustices. Don't isolate yourselves. For me, that is very important, and has been a driving force in my work. Intersectionalities. So that's why you always find me almost everywhere. Here I am in Worcester, and I'm already engaged with the homeless population of Worcester, because I'm trying to. The LGBT movement is very scattered here, but I'm already part of a church that is LGBT friendly and has an LGBT, what do they call it, project. So I'm already part of that. So I needed to look for something else. I'm not one to just sit, and I just wanted to help. And then I found out that the Worcester community has a very big homeless
Yeah.
population, and so I'm already there.
Yeah.
And so I just want people to know that we are not a pariah movement that we only have to speak out when issues concern us. We
Right.
should, right now, we should be ups and in arms with what is happening in the federal government and all this, not only because of the issues with the transgenders and all that. We should be up in arms with the immigration issues. We should be up in arms with the financial,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kasha. I really appreciate your time. I'm so happy to be in conversation with you. And also, I just have to say before we end, the Worcester undercurrent is so amazing that I lived there for 6 years, and now or 5 years, and now you're there as well. It's just, I love that. So I hope we can continue the conversation offline. Really appreciate you. Excited to get this as part of our larger archive. And we will link out in below this interview to your work with the Carr Center and just more about your perspective and your activism specifically about Uganda, and sharing all of your expertise. So thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording here. Really appreciate you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.